one of those teams that's kind of in that middle ground is UAB, where the players became the first ones to vote and opt into effectively the college sports union. Trent Dilfer, the former NFL quarterback, former ESPN analyst, who's now the head coach there, said he actually wanted this, and he informed the players about this opportunity and said, hey, it's going to happen eventually. You should join up right now. I'm curious, number one, how does any administration view a coach's actions like that? And number two, how soon do we potentially see other schools doing the exact same thing?
I asked Trent Dilfer's bosses at UAB what they felt about it. They decided not to comment on it. It is an odd position, really. Yeah, Dilfer is, in a sense, Dilfer is middle management in college sports, and you don't often see management asking the labor force to organize. So it is a unique position Dilfer's taking there, and one that I think we see more and more coaches who want to position themselves as player-centric and player-friendly, who are going to stand up and say, we need to be giving more to the players right now. There's a little distinction between what this group is and a union, just for sort of employment legal reasons. They're trying to negotiate a little bit differently, but in effect, they're trying to do the same thing. And I think we will see more people jump on board with this. As we said at the start, schools are starting to see why it would be good for them to bargain collectively with athletes. And the biggest missing piece of the puzzle to get to a point where schools are sharing that revenue and bargaining with athletes is they need somebody to sit across the table from them who represents the athletes. Right now, they're a group all over the place, and you need to be able to have a single entity or only a couple entities that you can actually sit across the table from and bargain. So this group, the athletes.org, that was down at UAB a couple weeks ago, signing them up, is one of a handful of different people trying to position themselves right now to be essentially the Players Association and the voice of athletes when we inevitably get to that bargaining table.
You mentioned a school like Akron, maybe in this future universe here, them playing Ohio State every now and then. It just doesn't happen. What happens to programs like that? Or what even happens to programs like my alma mater, Boston College, that just lost Jeff Hafley to an NFL defensive coordinator job, in large part because he was having to recruit his players and then re-recruit them and then re-recruit them again after spring ball to keep them out of the portal and find NIL money, which is not really prevalent at a school like BC. Those programs that might be in one of the Power 5 or Power 4 conferences, I guess, at this point, between them or the MACs of the world, what happens to those programs if we move in this direction?
It's a great question. I think of this in two phases. Within the next year or 2 years at max, we're going to see schools having the opportunity to share revenue with players more directly. And that's going to create a rift where schools who want to go all in and spend as much money as they can to build the best rosters are going to do so. And some schools might decide that's not for them. We'd rather look at this differently. And I think that phase two of that plays out in the next 5 to 8 to 10 years as all of these conference TV contracts roll over, where 5 to 10 years from now, when the Big Ten is looking at signing its next deal, it's the TV partners are probably going to look at that and say, hey, we love the Ohio State versus Washington and USC matchup, but we don't really care for Maryland versus Illinois. Could you cut those guys? And there's going to be this dash over the next 5 to 8 years for the Boston colleges of the world to decide if they want to be at the big kids table. They need to spend a lot of money in the next 5 to 8 years to have the best teams they possibly can in order to make sure they get a seat on that bus before this big rift happens between some of these top-notch schools and everybody else in college sports.
Dan, last thing for you. Appreciate you being here. Give me the timeline here. I know it's difficult when you're talking about things that are in the court system and you got multiple different cases, a lot of moving parts here, but how soon can we see any of these things potentially take effect? In other words, this fall, are any of the things we're talking about actually going to impact college football right now, or are these ripple effects that we're really going to be pushing out for a few years?
The only guarantee is it's going to be slower than everybody wants it to be and thinks it should be, I think. This year we will probably see some changes that come as schools get more involved in paying NIL deals for players, and it already looks more professional than it did a couple of years ago as schools are sort of saying the things out loud that used to get whispered in the back of the bar, by campus. But I don't think the really significant shifts are probably at least a year out. My best guess is we start to see some of that summer of 2025, and then it evolves from there.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.